Welcome to our last Talking in the Library event of the semester. We'll have a robust schedule next term. My name is Adam Braver. I'm the library program director. I also teach in the creative writing faculty. And I just want to quickly mention that the Talking in the Library program is part of the Mary Teft White endowment, which this room, as you know, many of you probably know, is the Mary Teft White Cultural Center. Mary Teft White was an alumna of Roger Williams University, who graduated, I believe she was in her 70s when she graduated, not because it took her so long to get through school, but because she went back to school later in life. And it was an incredibly meaningful experience for her, and one of the ways she wanted to give back to the school was to have talks like this, in which people, which students could perhaps find some inspiration from people who've done different things in life and in the world, and gather some inspiration from that. So we are thankful for her for the funding, and thankful for you for coming under whatever circumstances brought you here. I'll say quickly that in the back there are books, Jewher's books, which are for sale, and my understanding is that it is a cash-only operation in the truest sense of Rhode Island. But that for those of you who don't have cash and want a book, you can reserve a book in the ticket store. Pay from there. But with that said, I want to welcome Jewher Ilham to Roger Williams. It's not the first time she's been here, and in fact, Jewher has a somewhat rich history with Roger Williams in that one of the projects we've had at the school for about 15 years is, we call them now the student advocacy seminars, was classes, courses, seminars in which students were partnered with a human rights organization to work on advocacy work, and particularly in this case on writers, scholars who have been imprisoned for the work because of what they've said, because of what they've done. About 10 years ago, the students entered into Jewher's life, or Jewher into our life, via the situation of her father, who at the time had been arrested and detained in China, which we'll get into in a moment. Briefly, we were put in contact with Jewher. We learned that she was here in the United States. We were put, some students looked her up on Facebook and wrote to her on Facebook and connected with her that way, and we convinced her somehow to come to Washington, D.C., to meet us in Washington, D.C., and to walk around the halls of the Capitol and start telling the story of her father with the students to the different representatives. And since then, many of the students have continued to work on behalf of her father. We've all remained close together. In fact, Jewher was just telling me about students from 10 years ago, you know, what they're doing now, and who got married, and so on and so forth. So anyway, a long way of saying that there's been a history. For those of you who don't, we'll talk a lot about Jewher's father and about her people, the Uyghur people, and that may be a name that is familiar to some of you, Uyghurs, U-Y-G-H-U-R, which are have been in the news a lot over the last few years. Yeah.
Can you spell that word again?
Yeah. U-Y-G-H-U-R.
How many people have heard of the Uyghur people? Okay, better than I thought. More people than I thought. 10 years ago when I arrived in Indiana, no one in my class knew what Uyghurs even meant. So that's pretty good.
So for those of you who don't, the Uyghurs are a Muslim ethnic minority within China, through Western China, and in what the Chinese would call the Xinjiang region, what many Uyghurs would call the Uyghur region. that is, it's a very expansive region. They've been there for thousands of years. And in ways that many of us historically might, in the United States might recognize, have lived as a minority under different laws, different rules, different customs being eradicated, and so on. And more recently, the reason why so many people have heard about them is over the last few years, many of the Uyghurs were put into quote-unquote re-education camps, which many people will call concentration camps, trying to be switched of identities, and then in turn put into forced labor situations, all of which we'll get into. But just to give it some context, but what we're going to do is I'm going to ask Jewher a few questions on background to get the conversation going, but I really would love for you also just to raise your hand if you have questions and jump into the conversation as well. So this is not just listening for the two of us. We talk all the time, so we don't need to sit on the stage and talk. But but as a bit of background, Jewher, you did not grow up in the Uyghur region, you grew up in Beijing. Your father is an academic, was by profession an academic at Yale University, an economist. And just to kind of get the story going, particularly how Jewher ended up here, is that your father had accepted a position at Indiana University on a fellowship, and he asked you to come with him. Is that right?
Yes, correct. I was 18 years old, just got into college, around the same age as some of you here at that time. And my father asked me to accompany him to come to the US. And he booked me a flight with a return date of 2 weeks. And I did not want to come. I wanted to go to this prom thingy that I never experienced because it's not a thing in China. I only seen it in movies. I wanted to go to that kind of prom ball thing with my friends. I refused. I rejected, and my father forced me, kind of, convinced me to come with him, and he guilt-tripped me and said, I'm going to be away for 2 years. Are you sure you're not going to want to see your old dad for 2 more weeks? I said, okay. We got the visas, and my father also asked me to not even tell my mother. My parents are separated. So my mom didn't even know I was going to come to the US for 2 weeks. I thought, no big deal. I'm going to come back in 2 weeks. I will tell her after I'm back. Anyways, she will see me after I'm back. That's a long story. So we got to the airport. We thought nobody else knew. We were very careful. We checked our bags. We got our boarding passes. Everything went so smooth. We were stopped at the border. Technically, my father was stopped at the border. I passed no problem because I was just a teenager. I just turned 18. And my father was stopped. What do we call it? Security, basically the Homeland Security in China showed up. About 4 to 6 of the security guards showed up and started arresting my father in front of me in a very violent way. By the way, police brutality is not as publicly demonstrated in China. Usually they try to do it behind the doors. And for me, it was a shock. I did not know what was going on, and I asked, where are you taking my father? The security realized I was my father's daughter, so I was taken away with him together. After a few hours of detention, I was given the option to leave. I did not speak a word of English. I mean, a little bit, like, hello, how are you? I'm fine, thank you, and you? I knew those. But my only purpose to come to the US was to come with my father, and so I could see how America is like, so I have something to brag to my friends too. And it didn't make sense for me to leave the country, so I told them I will not leave. My father dragged me up and said, this might be your last chance, and you should go. I refused again. Stubborn kid, you know. My father said, I'd rather you sweep the streets in the US than you stay here. Look around you, look how this country is treating you. Do you still want to stay here? I still refused. Stubborn kid, as I mentioned. And my father said that this might be your last chance. And he tried to trick me into leaving. He said, okay, you can still go. Don't waste the money on the flight tickets. They're expensive. If you don't like it, you will come back. I knew he was tricking me, but I kind of didn't have a choice. My father forced me out of the room, and that was my last time seeing my father again. And that was my last time seeing my family again. Since February 2nd, 2013, I've been away from home on the other side of the world. I arrived at Indiana, knowing no one, having no money, had a Nokia phone that didn't work in the US. But luckily, the professor who was supposed to come pick up my father showed up at the airport and picked me up. And did not see my father, and he was kind enough to allow me to stay in his daughter's room for a month. And my life started like that. I registered in English program. I learned English. After 2 years, I went into college. I graduated in 2019. Now I'm working in Washington, D.C. at a labor rights organization. And what happened to my father during all these years were that right after the airport incident, he was sent back home after 3 days. 3 days he was detained at the airport. And when he was sent back home, he didn't regain his freedom. He was banned from leaving the country completely. He was banned from leaving the house. He was under house arrest for about 11 months. And then on January 15th, 2014, he was violently taken away in front of my 2 little brothers from our apartment in Beijing. And later he was sentenced to life imprisonment under separatism-related charges, which is a very common term the Chinese government uses to shut up dissidents and to prohibit from citizens from questioning. Usually if you committed any other so-called crimes, you could, appeal, you could have citizens would come and question where's your evidence, but when it's related to state security or like government, stability, those kind of terms, then the Chinese government they could always shut people down without, forbidding them from questioning. And my father had a 2-day show trial. He was allowed to have a attorney. He was allowed to have multiple attorneys, whom later all got revoked for their licenses just for volunteering to be a representative for my father. And that was a gesture to silence academics who could have opinions that's slightly different from what the Chinese government want people to believe in, or who educates people, given education, information towards students that could be out of the textbooks that's approved by the Chinese government, and who could be providing platforms for people to freely communicate and exchange. Like my father, in 2006, he built a website called Jewher.com. It's a website to have basically anyone could post, exchange. It's like a public forum. And as many of you know, there are 4 countries in the world that bans Facebook, Instagram, Google, and all those social medias. And one of them is Cuba, North Korea, Iran, and guess what the last one is? China. And what does that mean? It means people cannot freely exchange with their ideas. The only social media platforms that are available in China are state-owned, state-run, and state-governed, and state-censored. Therefore, any sensitive terms, for example, Winnie the Pooh, could subject you into prison or some type of detention or mistreatment. Why Winnie the Pooh? It sounds so innocent, right? Because someone described that Xi Jinping, the current chairman of China, president of China, looks like Winnie the Pooh. He found it offensive and he banned this term. So any term like this, it could be anything from steamed bun to Winnie the Pooh to freedom of expression are all considered and categorized as sensitive terms. And my father wanted to break that sensitivity, wanted to break that prison for people. And he provided this platform, which he purchased a server in the US with he was also a businessman. It was his side hustle. So he used his own money to purchase a server in the US and ran it for a few years so people could, to prevent it from being shut down by the Chinese government, and so people could view it for free. And that attracted the Chinese authorities' attention over the years. He was threatened, he was bribed, he was, his family was threatened. I mean, they would threaten him with me or my brothers. For example, they would forbid me from being registered in school, so I could not get into college, I could not get into high school. They would forbid my brothers from being registered to have a Beijing birth certificate, so they could not go to school in Beijing. They would do all kinds of things. All parents, they just want the best for their children. So my father always felt bad for what had happened, or all the trouble that me and my brothers have had growing up. Just a little background information too. My brothers, when everything happened, the youngest one was only 3.5 years old. The older one was 7. I was old enough to process a lot of things, although still I did not understand everything. For me, I was just a stubborn teenager. But my 7-year-old brother was at a very difficult age. After witnessing the brutal detention, imprisonment of my father, he started developing heart issues. He had difficulties in school, even though he was top 1 for all his exams in the past. And it created lots of distress for my extended family as well, from my uncles. 2 of my uncles put in re-education camps. My cousin was sentenced to 10 years in prison for having a photo of my father in her cell phone. Many, many more. And these are just some of the examples. And this is not now just only happening to my family. I used to feel, the first few years of my advocacy work in the US, I used to feel so lonely. I told Adam that, why is it me? Like, why is it my family? We didn't do anything wrong. We've just been trying to protect people and guard people's rights. And why are we targeted? And what have we done wrong? And then slowly, I realized not just my father had disappeared from our family. Many, many more fathers, uncles, brothers, sisters, aunts have been disappeared and removed from their daily lives and disconnected from their freedom. What do I mean by that? Since 2014, Xi Jinping made a visit to the Uyghur region. For people who think this is a very remote region where just poor people live in, it's actually, as Adam mentioned, it's a pretty large area. It's actually 1/6 of China's mass land. So, and China is one of the largest countries in the world. If you didn't know that, you should know that. And the Uyghur population estimated, well, the Chinese statistics is about 11-12 million, but it is actually estimated to be 15 to 20 million population. And that is just for the Uyghurs. There are other ethnic groups who are also living in the Uyghur region, like Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, and there are also Inner Mongolians who also live in the Uyghur region as well. There are Hui Muslims as well. So we have realized a pattern of mass detention where at around 2018, there were estimated to be 1.8 million Uyghur people were subject to imprisonment. And now, up to 2022, more than 3.2 million Uyghur people have been subjected to mandatory forced labor transfers and labor camps. So these numbers are not just some made-up numbers that we're just jumping with abstract. These are all names and lives, and just like you here, we're all just human beings, just like everyone else. We have a father, we have a mother, we have a teacher, we have a classmate, just like everyone else. But those people are stripped away from their normal lives. Some of them were old. They're old enough to be supposed to be enjoying their retirement, being with their great-great-grandchildren, yet they're serving in a forced labor camp, learning how to sew a cotton garment. Some of them are young enough to 14 years old, they're just about to graduate middle school, but they're still also locked up in one of those detention facilities. And today, I don't know where my father is. Family visits are not allowed, which is illegal in China. Not saying that Chinese government ever respected its own law, but I'm just saying. My cousin, she's still in prison. My grandma passed away last year, and my father was forbidden from even attending the funeral, which is also his legal right in China. And many more. I know that my daily job is to interview workers around the world. My job is not focused on China, but it's part of my job does work on China, but it's not completely all my job. But we do interview workers around the world. And part of my job, I interview some Uyghur detainees and survivors. Most of them have reported that they don't know where their extended families are, and they can't call or even reach out to their loved ones. Because any international phone call number shows up on their family members' phones, it could put them in prison. And could be huge trouble. So yeah, that's the little bit depressing background of the current Uyghur situation. However, that's not who Uyghurs are. We're more than that. It's sad that we're known and now introduced to the world because of the crimes against humanity, and also which I call the genocide towards my people, where over 80% of the Uyghur women are sterilized and forced to input IUDs in their body so they can no longer make Uyghur next generations, where men have been put in prison, they've been fed unknown medicines, or as reported and testified by camp survivors, so they can no longer be fertile, they can no longer be with another woman for the rest of their lives. What does that mean? It is preventing from Uyghur people from being born ever again. And that is with an intention to erase the next generation of Uyghurs. Where Uyghur language is no longer allowed to be spoken in schools or even at homes. Where Uyghur culture are no longer allowed to be practiced. Where the religion of Islam is also not allowed to be practiced. I'm not sure what's happening to this. Am I loud enough? Yeah. Okay, thank you. I'm going to take this away because it's kind of annoying. Many people argue that this is culture genocide. I say it's a full-on genocide, but people have different definitions for genocide. I understand that, but not every genocide had to be occurred in a way of mass bombing or slaughtering. It could happen in a softer-looking way, but with the intention of erasing a community. Uyghur children are now growing up wearing Han Chinese costumes, reciting Tang Dynasty Chinese poetry. Besides their looks, they are nothing Uyghurs anymore. They don't remember that they're Uyghurs because their families are not around them to teach them who they are. They don't know where their parents are. What they know is that patriotism towards the Chinese government. That's not what a 5-year-old should be memorizing every day. That's not what a 4-year-old should be memorizing every day. What they should know is, my mom cooked my favorite Uyghur food this morning. I didn't like the peppers in it. Those should be the concern that they had every day, not, oh my God, I got punished for saying Yaximsiz, which is hello in Uyghur. I'm able to speak with my mother, who lives in Beijing, as a translator. I bought her an iPhone, so that's the only way for us to communicate. So we can have iMessage and not using Chinese apps. My mom used to, in Uyghur culture, we say Assalamu alaikum. Muslim culture, we say Assalamu alaikum, or we say Allah amanet. Assalamu alaikum means like peace be upon you. Allah amanet means like Allah wish you peace. Do you know what my mother greets me with now? Xi Jinping amanet. Parti amanet. Parti amanet means like the Communist Party wish you peace. That's how my mother greets me now. The word Allah does not come out of her mouth anymore. She's afraid. And she can't even recognize she has fear anymore because it is so normalized. The moment when I say, oh, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, I'm gonna eat. That's when we say before, it's like, Lord, thank you for your food, kind of thing in Arabic. My mom immediately start doing this. The microphone is underneath, right? She does this, so it is not heard. Because whoever is monitoring it could use that against her. So now I say it with her, Xi Jinping Hamanet, Party Hamanet. And sorry, what was your question?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just wondering, is she allowed to have that iPhone, or are you kind of just like going around?
She is allowed because she lives in Beijing, but if she lived in Uyghur region, she wouldn't have been allowed to use that to communicate with me.
Okay.
Yeah, so a little bit background information, for people who live in Beijing, basic is kind of like you have a kind of immunity for certain layers. Not full layers, but you could be considered a lot safer because there are press there, there are international visitors there, corporations there, and the Chinese government is trying to deny that they abuse human rights, so they don't do it as obviously. But back home, where the press do not have access to, where international community do not have free access to, they can do whatever they want. And if people disappear, they disappear. I remember years ago, the Chinese government was able to shut down the internet of the entire region for 2 years. No internet access, can you imagine that? No Wi-Fi, no internet, you cannot post. Not just censored, a word, you cannot post, period. So that's how much power and control the Chinese government had over the region and the community and the entire population. But yeah, my mom is able to communicate with me. However, it's all monitored.
Yeah, how she said she covers the mic.
Yeah, I thought in the beginning, since I bought the phone here for her, it wouldn't have been monitored, but I realized later that it was monitored because I was invited to a couple's wedding in Indiana. And I was excited about it, so I told my mom, I was excited, I'm invited to this wedding, I'm invited this dress and this shoes to attend. It's the first wedding I'm about to attend. I am so excited. And she was like, oh, that is so great. Which date is it on? I told her it's blah, blah, blah date at blah, blah, blah location. I just did not think anything about it. The next week I know, I was uninvited to the wedding. The police, state police, reach out to the couple's family back home and threaten. The couple's sister was pregnant, very pregnant, like 8 months pregnant. And they threatened, said, if you're going to invite separatists and extremists like Jewher Ilham, and people like this, like Jewher Ilham, your sister's child is never going to be born. It's never going to see the sun. And that you will know the consequences. So I was uninvited. By the way, for the record, I was 21 years old, and I was still struggling with English. And just because I was my father's daughter and I was advocating for his release, they were constantly monitoring me. And later I also realized that they sent agents to school to monitor, our work, even what kind of subjects I'm taking in school. And I had a classmate who confessed to me that it's not like a spy, but they're just students who were exchanged for free tuition, and that all they need to do is just to very innocently say what's happening there, who are they meeting, what kind of classes are they taking, what are taught in those classes. And for them, oh, that's a great bargain. All I need to do is just to send a few email and text messages, and I don't have to pay $43,000 a year. Wonderful. So, I was pretty surprised how far the Chinese government was willing to do to censor and monitor people.
So, Jewher, I have a question for you, and then I'll open it up more. So, one is I want to make clear, because I don't know if it's clear, that Jewher's father, Ilham, told you, his real quote-unquote crime was that his chief interest, besides this creating the website, his chief interest was in bridging the gap between Uyghurs and Han Chinese in terms of trying to get dialogue, sort of, can we get along, do we have to live so separately, and that in itself was a threat to the government. And that he was, if I recall, the first political prisoner in modern times to have a life sentence.
Yes.
And I was with Jewher
In China.
in China. I was with Jewher not too, the day before, and we all thought like the worst thing we could imagine was 10 years. Like, oh my God, can you imagine if it was 10 years and it became life? And to give you a sense of his importance in the world community, immediately at that time, Obama was president. Obama made statements, the EU made statements, all the world leaders made statements about this. And really, Jewher and I, a couple other people met with officials of the State Department initially on that first trip to Washington. Many people knew her father, and they just couldn't understand it. They kept saying, he's not a radical. He's a completely moderate, reasonable voice. He's sort of saying what we in the State Department are saying. But so just to give it that context, and he was very careful to make clear that he was not talking about separatism or war or rebellion, but dialogue, which is what in the academic, certainly besides his own personality, part of being an academic is trying to work things out through dialogue. But when you were here, you found yourself in an unusual situation of your father being detained. He hadn't been fully tried at that point, but you were put in a position to do something you'd never done before, and that was get into a political world and have to and advocate, and you were very careful not to talk in the way you're talking to us now, in the sense of
I'm still careful.
But you didn't want to be seen as political. You didn't want this to be seen as you having a cause,
Yeah.
other than the cause being your father and getting your father released. And I wonder if you can tell us what about that transition. And I'm thinking in particular, one of the things that came out of that first visit that we were in Washington was that you ended up being asked to testify in front of Congress about this. CCC. I wonder if you can talk about what that experience was like and what it was like to sort of be thrust into the middle of something. Again, you were 19 then, but at 19, in a place that's unfamiliar to you, in a situation you'd rather not be in altogether.
So as I mentioned, my current job, I'm a labor rights researcher. I do investigation on global supply chains. On the side, I do human rights advocacy work. I also help translate for, volunteer to translate for refugees for their asylum interviews and cases. I did not want to do any of this, by the way, and I did not plan for this life at all. Oh my goodness. Since I was 4 years old, I was trained for dancing. In art, I was always a dancer, and I hated school. Oh my goodness. I never imagined graduating, doing 3 degrees and stuff like that. And when I came here, I was like, I have to learn English. I always hated school, now I have to do English. After English, I have to get into college. Excuse me? And after getting to college, I have to do advocacy work? I have to write my speeches? What? It was, every day it's just like a renewal of shocking. Every day. And, but I had to do it. I didn't have a choice. I didn't have anyone else who could do it for my family or for my father. I was the only person in my family that made it outside of the country safely. I didn't have a choice. I had to. And my father raised me. I mentioned my parents were divorced when I was very little. My father raised me. He was the mom, the grandma, the dad, the everything. He was my best friend. I was mad at him for a very long time for focusing too much on advocacy work and neglected me. And we were very, very close. So when I learned he was gonna be sentenced to life, spend the rest of his life in prison, knowing what kind of man he was, I could not take it. I knew I had to do everything within my power or outside of my power to change what was happening or change the outcome.
So yeah, I had to do it. I had to get into this field instead of studying dance and art. I did political science. I hated it. So I still do. But it was a culture shock, a lot of culture shock. When I first went to DC, I was shocked how we could just walk into the State Department at the Hill. Like, you just walk in like that.
Jewher grabbed me, like, don't go in, don't go in, you're gonna get shot. Don't go in.
We'll try that in China, see what happens. So I was shocked. That was my first taste of real democracy. At least at that time, it was a real democracy for me, and taste of real freedom. It was shocking to me. Well, it was already shocking to me that I could raise my hand and say whatever I want in my class, even though it's completely what the teacher might not even agree with, and you will not get into trouble. That was a shock for me too. But the moment we could walk into the government building and just come out with my H&M bag, it was a huge shock to me. And at that moment, I think it strengthened my determination that I think I can do this. I hate it, but I think I can bear with it if I can get to experience, like fully experience the freedom that I didn't have before. I'll try to tolerate it a little bit longer. And then for a few years, what I did was just repeating what was happening to my dad. Repeating it, repeating it, repeating it. Only focused on my father's case. I did not want to talk about a bigger issue. I didn't want to answer people when people say, oh, so what do you think about the independence? Since the Uyghur region, for a little bit culture context, background context, the Uyghur region was once independent, kind of like Tibet. That's why the Chinese government is very sensitive about those two regions, because they were once an independent country. So whenever people ask me, I just like, oh, I don't know anything, I'm just a teenager, no English, no English. So I would purposely say speaking horrible English so people would not bother me about it anymore. But later on, at that point, I was afraid if I comment on things that I didn't understand enough about, or that I didn't have, confidence in, answering, I might put my father in further trouble. I might put my family in more trouble. So I was always so careful. I said, I'm only going to stick to what I know the most, my father. So that's what I did. But in 2018, when I started reading all these articles and reports and hearing Uyghurs around me saying, I can't get in touch with my family anymore, have you heard anything? And then it's not just one people have been complaining, 10 people or 50 people. I hear every Uyghur that I know, every Uyghur person in the diaspora are reporting, where's my family, where's my dad, where's my mom, where's my wife, where's my children? Then I realized it's not about my family anymore, it's not about my dad anymore. What my father fears the most is happening. That's when I came to realization. And I also realized that I cannot just talk about my father's case anymore. And then, 2018, I started studying Central Asian Studies because I wanted to be more confident in what I was saying. Uyghur region is in Central Asia, so the studies will fall into the category. I wanted to learn my own history. I wanted to learn my own language. Oh, another background information, another reflection of freedom. I did not speak my mother tongue until I came to the US. Embarrassing, right? I was born and raised in Beijing. I was not allowed to study Uyghur in school. So I took my classes in the US. I studied Uyghur language in a third country with a professor who's Uyghur but from Uzbekistan. And now I can read, speak, hear, everything. I wouldn't say I'm 100% fluent, but I'm pretty close to fluency. And I am very proud for the US for allowing that to happen for me and many Uyghurs or the diaspora who were stripped away from their culture and their identity. And another thing was their demonstration for freedom for me was I was allowed to step foot inside a mosque for the first time in my life. I did not have the chance to do that. I own 3 copies of Quran in my home now, in 3 languages. I wanted to do it. I even post about it because I just wanted the Chinese government to see. I wanted to piss them off. And we weren't allowed to do that. Having a Quran, that's like a serious crime now. There's a joke in the Uyghur region back in 2018 and 2017 is that you don't see the Uyghurs on the streets during the day anymore. You see them at 3 a.m. near the river. They're all mingling there. Why? Oh, they're throwing and burying the books, so they're not burned. They will not be burned. So the river was clogged with all the books that had to be buried underneath the mud in the river, because people were slowly getting arrested for that. And yeah, I had to choose my battle. I had to choose this path after making a new life decision, life career, whatever, after coming here. And in 2018, I had to change my advocacy angle. I no longer focus only on my father's case anymore, because I knew that releasing my father is not going to be enough. All the Uyghurs were equal, and we all deserve the freedom. We all deserve the chance to step foot inside a mosque without having to worry of being detained or being sentenced to life. We all deserve the freedom of having whatever copies of Quran in whatever languages in your household. We all deserve to study our mother tongue and speak it at home or outside of our homes. We're all should be allowed and have the freedom to learn our own culture identity. Where are you from?
Massachusetts.
Imagine someone would tell you, you are not from there, it's all made up in your head. Don't speak English. That is what's happened. Sounds ridiculous, right? But it is very normalized, not only for the Uyghurs, for the Tibetans as well, for the Inner Mongolians as well, even in Hong Kong. Hong Kongers have to speak Mandarin. By the way, their mother tongue is Cantonese for people who are not familiar. They have to study Mandarin, and they have to write in Mandarin. Government elected officials must be fluent in Mandarin. Same thing with the Uyghurs. During the pandemic, when all the factories are in lockdown, when everybody is quarantining at home, who do you think were in the factories making those PPEs and masks for people? The Uyghurs who were detained. Literally. And now, I see a few shirts that says Roger Williams, or like, you know, any shirts here. Have you ever thought about where were they made and who made them? Oftentimes when we buy things, we don't think that deep, like, that's cute color and it's so soft and fluffy. That's what comes to our mind. Or it's on a huge discount. Can you imagine? I got it for $9. That's what comes through our head. We don't think, who made them? In what condition? Where? What's happening to them? What happened to them? Where are they now? We don't think about that. But I have to. I can no longer shop in peace anymore. But good thing is, I work in labor rights. That's just one of the very reasons I chose this career, is because I wanted to be able to shop in peace. I'm a shopaholic, I have to admit that. So I wanted to shop in peace. Adam has to testify. He knows that I just said I carried an H&M bag into the hill for the first time, right? So I was a shopaholic since it runs in the blood, I guess. And I would like for everybody to be able to shop in peace and not having to have the doubts like me anymore. However, in order to achieve that, there's so much more we have to do. Good thing is in the US government had passed one legislation. It's called Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act in end of 2021. This law, Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, prohibits anything that's made and manufactured in whole or in parts that in the Uyghur region from entering the US border, unless the supplier can provide clear and convincing evidence.
What was that called again?
Uyghur, UYGHUR, Forced Labor Prevention Act. So it went into effect June 2022. It passed end of 2021. And it's, Oh, yes. So, for people who know a little bit about the Uyghurs, they oftentimes hear about the cotton industries, the complicity in the forced labor. However, it's just one of the many industries that are at high risk of being linked to Uyghur forced labor. We have identified about 40 industries that are linked to Uyghur forced labor, from beauty, cosmetic stuff, food, agriculture, textiles, solar, communication technologies, and many, many more. Like the PVC panels here, the floorings, those are not real hardwood. And also the electronic, like the cameras here. You most likely will see it's made in China. And guess what? 12% of the global PVC is sourced from the Uyghur region. Up to last year, 45% of the solar panel, polysilicon, solar grade polysilicon, globally were sourced from the Uyghur region. 25% of the cotton were sourced from the Uyghur region. 10% of the aluminum, which is for EV cars, and is so trendy now, right? Are sourced from the Uyghur region, or there I said the polysilicon. It's key material for solar panels. Solar panels now what's trendy of green energy, right? And I was like, okay, sometimes we have to sacrifice little human rights in order to protect the Mother Earth. That's what the environmentalists say. However, yes, that's true in some way if you do really use the real green energy. However, the solar panels in China, they are produced and manufactured by burning coal, which is triple more damaging to the environment than you just regular way burning regular energy. So it's not ethically made nor humanitarianly or environmentally friendly way of making it. So in this case, shouldn't we try to be more mindful when we shop until one day we can fully, be able to just, okay, now I can shop in peace. I recommend one little tool for students that I help kind of contributed into. There was a startup with a bunch of young folks. They said, we have no connections, we have no money, but we have tech skills. So we can help build you an app. And so we worked together. We built this plugin that everybody can download for free on their laptops. It's called Uyghur Forced Labor Brand Checker. Once you download that on your laptops, it only takes 5 seconds. You just do the plugin. You go to Google and add the plugin. And let's say the next time when you shop on Zara, oh my God, Zara is so cute. All these hundreds of styles every day. It's so cheaper. All the Balenciaga, so nice, right? But guess what? A banner will pop up and say, oops, this item might be tainted by Uyghur forced labor. Are you sure you still want to shop from them? But there are some brands, it will receive a banner like this, for example, like Reformation. It's one of my favorite brands. It's so chic, right? And also it's produced in an environmental, very friendly way. Their brand image is very ethical. It will say, pink banner says, congratulations, this brand have been doing everything they can to avoid from being tainted from Uyghur forced labor. So yeah, I highly recommend this app. It's free. Uyghur Forced Labor Brand Checker. It takes you no more than 5 seconds. It is very easy, and it only works on your laptop, not on your phone, unfortunately. Hopefully we'll be able to come up with something. Definitely not me. I am not good at tech, so hopefully somebody contributes their skills and come up with an app. And on top of that, on a university level, as a university student, when you are shopping in your bookstore, when you're shopping your college items like the Roger Williams shirt, how can you make sure that those items are not produced in sweatshop conditions? You could actually make that happen. You could actually help prevent that by asking the university to be affiliated with labor rights watchdogs like Worker Rights Consortium, my organization, Worker Rights Consortium. What do? we do not only monitor Uyghur forced labor, we actually monitor forced labor in all 24 countries. So it is not just free of Uyghur forced labor, it's going to be free of all labor rights violations. So you could ask your university to be affiliated. So far there are 150 universities are already affiliated with Worker Rights Consortium. I don't know why Roger Williams hasn't become one, so maybe you could push for that. Usually students would urge administration to, to be affiliated, or faculty members. And the more students ask for it, the merrier. And it actually doesn't even cost much to be affiliated, and the university will have access to all the database, and the suppliers will be able to be vetted and be able to make sure your items are not inhumanely produced, whether by someone in Southeast Asia or Middle East or in the US or in China. So yeah, I really recommend students, after today, if there's one thing that you're like, okay, I feel so terrible about what's happening to the Uyghurs, I might not be from a billionaire family, I might not be from a politician family, but what I do have a huge power is to make sure that my campus is free from forced labor tainted goods. And that is something that you could actually make happen just within a few months.
Want to take some questions?
Yes.
Where are your brothers now?
They're all in China. Yeah, no one is out.
Do you still talk to them?
Not my brothers and my stepmom, because they don't have passports and their birth certificates are not from Beijing. Remember I mentioned in Beijing, you're much more safer. Their birth certificates are from the Uyghur region, which means, and they're also under constant control. Actually, after my father was detained, for the first 6 months, every day there were at least 4 policemen sleeping in front of our home, and they would be monitored to everywhere. And he was only 3 years old, the other one was only 7, like as if they're gonna be a suicidal serial killer or something. But they were followed everywhere, and they're still under constant monitoring. And receiving a phone call from overseas is not the safest idea for them. The older one just turned 18 3 weeks ago, and the younger one is turning 15 years old this March. When I left, they were like little dumplings, and now they're so big, and their voice, I heard that it's so weird. I was so shocked because I have Chinese friends who would go visit them, and to get videos and messages out, so they would sneak it out from me. But sometimes I don't even know when it was filmed, because they have to make unannounced visits in order for their safety to not be compromised. So if they're lucky, then they're home, and then they will be able to convey messages and the money and the food and whatever. And then if they're not lucky, then they'll just drop the things at the door and some pictures of me at the door. And that's how we have been able to communicate with each other, but it's not like regular communication.
Are people still like actively trying to work on getting your father out of prison?
Some, yes, some. This past February, we have enacted a Nobel Peace Prize nomination campaign, which we gathered more than 200 signatures from 21 countries, including professors, lawmakers, and former Nobel Peace Prize laureates. And the Chinese government was not very happy about that, but that's exactly what I'm trying to do, right? Because sometimes pissing them off means there is, reaction is good. We would love a reaction, and hopefully reaction triggers a change. Because I haven't heard anything from my dad for the past 10 years, I'd like to know if he's alive.
That's what I was gonna.
And what I did learn was this February, one of his prison guards were detained, was imprisoned. He has 6 prison guards. I know, too many for one man, right? 6 prison guards.
Specifically assigned.
Yes, and 5 were Han Chinese, only one of them was Uyghur, and the Uyghur one was imprisoned for, I don't know for how many years, but he was imprisoned for leaking his health information and his treatments in the prison to his friends. However, we don't know what was the information that he leaked. However, it does make me really nervous because it must be something unusual. Otherwise, why would they be imprisoning his prison guard? If it was just, it's all good, everything is fine, I doubt. So I'd like to find out. And the Chinese government was up to negotiation, open to negotiation with me in March, but then they bailed me. They didn't show up to the phone call. So, and when the EEAS, which is the Europe Human Rights Dialogue Group, when they reached out to the Chinese government during the EU Human Rights annual EU-China Human Rights Dialogue, they raised my father's case, and then the Chinese government and raised that Jewher Ilham would like to have video call on visiting rights for her father, and then they said for that to happen, she will need to shut up about China, shut up about her criticism of China. So I like to put the word out there. It is my right as a human being to not shut up. It is my right as a daughter to raise my concerns over my father, and that it should not be in an exchange. If that's what they wanted to exchange in order to receive just a video call, that is not a very great bargain for me. I caused way more damage to them on this than for a video call.
It's not like a question, it was like more of a statement, someone else has a question I can grab. I'll just chat with you after.
Did you have a question? Somebody had
I wanted to ask you, like, is religion in general being cracked down on in China, or is it just Islam in particular?
religion in general. As I mentioned, Tibetans have been, actually not just religion, religion included, but any different ideas and ideologies are targeted. So religion is one of a different kind of ideology as the Chinese government's ideology. So if you see Hong Kongers, they practice freedom, democracy, and that is different from what the Chinese government preaches, so they're targeted. Tibetans, Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, and then Chinese Christians, churches are torn apart. Priests are arrested and killed. Falun Gong practitioners, also their type of religion and ideology, they're all targeted, and also Chinese human rights lawyers. And there's the July 9th incident where hundreds of lawyers were targeted in the same day, and that same day they were cracked down, their license were revoked. So if you notice that anyone who could potentially have different ideas and threaten the Chinese government's regimes are targeted. And Uyghurs, being Muslim, is of course one of the different ideology from the Chinese government.
What do you think is most useful from student advocates for advocating on behalf of your father and for the movement in general?
Don't underestimate social media. I suck at social media, but it's really useful. I'd like to be better at it. I'm learning. I recently learned how to do location and filter. My husband taught me, but I'm working on it. But I really think social media is very useful. Keep the hashtags going. Hashtag free Ilham Tofti, hashtag free Uyghurs, hashtag end Uyghur forced labor. Those are the 3 key hashtags. Keep it going. Whenever you're free, lunch and Uyghur forced labor. Shopping and Uyghur forced labor. Like sunny day out, free Uyghurs. Oh, there's a dog peeing on the street. Chinese government release Uyghurs. You can just hashtag it. Embed it into your lifestyles, and not just for the Uyghurs. All the persecuted groups, they deserve the hashtags, and it doesn't cost people anything. I learned how to do it. It only takes 3 seconds. 3 seconds. It wasn't as hard as I thought. But yeah, I just suck at technology. I was too poor. I couldn't own technologies for a little bit, so I didn't get practice. But on top of that, as I mentioned, that you could, add in that semester, you have a class that for a student can next semester anymore. Okay. Previously, different universities, different programs, they have classes or that focus on adopting one case, and then you do student advocacy work. Some students choose to do that. And also, another useful thing is just to spread the word. If you make a goal of, I am telling one person that didn't know about it every day. Throughout the year, you will tell 365 people. And those 365 people will be telling more people. And somebody will be able to make a change, right? So I really, and also I do believe in boycott as well. Because of the boycott and because of the passage of the law, the Forced Labor Prevention Act, earlier I mentioned 45% of the global solar panels were produced in the Uyghur region, right? In a year, it dropped to 35%. And the Xinjiang cotton gin cell, the cotton gin cell dropped 40% in a year because of those boycott movement and because of those legislations. So I really do think boycott movements work, hashtags work, and hashtags underneath brands that are complicit work. They hate that. They hate those. You don't even need to write up a super creative sentence that has a slogan. You just say hashtag free Ubers, hashtag why you use forced labor. It's already damaging enough for their brand images, and brands will do everything they can to erase that kind of image and from their reputation. And they will try to clean up their supply chain. And a lot of brands are like, oh, it is very difficult to adapt supply chain. No, supply chains, I work in this, so I know that supply chains are so flexible. They're very flexible. It only takes maximum 6 months for a completely different supply chain to be shifted to something else. 6 months is all it takes. And it could take even shorter than that. I'm just saying 6 months is like the usual way. So if a brand say, we have this statement on ethical conduct, code of conduct, we have this statement, don't believe statements. Statements do not have any meanings. They are not held accountable legally for any words they say in their websites, on their website. So don't believe in anything they say unless they map out their supply chain and they have complete transparency and said, we actually don't source from China, or we actually don't have any suppliers in the Uyghur region. Otherwise, it means nothing. Because for a brand, the only way for a brand to ensure they're free from forced labor is to exit the region at every level of their supply chain. Because of the state-imposed forced labor, and because how severe the situation is in the region. And also as a student, one thing you could do as well is to cherish your family and your friends and loved ones and be able to speak with them, and don't let go of your right and that privilege, and don't let go of your freedom of expression ever, because a huge percentage of the people in this world do not have that access, and most of the Uyghur people cannot just pick up a phone call or text it off and love them. So please do that, not for my father or for my people, but do it for yourself. Because you never know. You never know. I never knew what I said to my father the very last time was going to be the last time that I was gonna that I spoke with him. So always, cherish what you have and your rights, because when people who really cherish their rights, they will understand and they will be able to pass along the kindness and be able to share it with other people too.
I was just going to say that I really admire the fact that you were able to come from all of these bad things that you were dealing with and decide to be an advocate for your people and your culture. I know we kind of skipped over you going to college. I feel like we went through really fast. Was that something really hard for you to do? Kind of finding the courage to be able to speak so proudly about it and show people what's going on?
Speaking about it wasn't the difficult part. The language barrier was the part. My first year I struggled a lot because I couldn't understand half of what the professor was saying. So having a history of not liking school, it was not easy. And in order to get a scholarship, and I had to study hard, and I had to, because I could not get a student loan. I'm not a U.S. citizen or anything. I could not get a student loan. I did not have that option, and I can't afford $43,000 a year. I simply can't. So in order to do that, I had to study so hard, harder than anyone else, any other international students, because all international students, when they chose to come to the US or any other countries, they study something called TOEFL, or is it IELTS test, something like that, or GRE. I did not do that. I came here thinking I was gonna be here for 2 weeks and then brag about it when I go home. So I did not have any preparation, so I had to study extra and be able to communicate with people accurately was a very difficult task for me. I wanted people to understand my struggles, my people's background, my history, my identity. I could not tell people. And I was so worried about the wrong representation. I was afraid, what if people think Uyghurs are like this if I did something like this? I have to be a good representative. If I'm probably most likely gonna be the only Uyghur some people will ever meet in their lives, and I want to leave a good impression that they will think Uyghurs are great people and they don't deserve to be treated like whatever, how they're treated right now. So that was a very challenging part. And I also had to, so my class schedule was 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. were all my classes. I was doing triple major, so I had to take 21 credits every semester, and until 3 p.m. And then from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. I would cook and sell my food. I would cook for more than 50 people just to earn money, so I could afford my first year when I didn't have my scholarship. And then from 7 p.m. I had to deliver the food. And then after delivery, from 8 p.m. until 10 p.m. I had the dance training. I was at the dance club at our university. And then from 10 to 3 a.m. I would study and to learn English and do homework and whatever and stuff like that. That was the most challenging year. The first 1.5 years was the most challenging, and then it got easier. After that, it's like nothing's challenging anymore. Like, okay, it's fine. The scholarship helped a lot. So I really urge people to to study hard and don't underestimate your power, because you could do anything. I didn't think I could pass math. I didn't think that was gonna happen, and I barely made it, but I did pass it after failing it twice. But you could do it, and yeah, believe in yourself.
Is your dad really doing all this? What do you think?
I doubt it. I doubt it. I doubt the Chinese government will tell them to give him hope. Because what the Chinese government is best at doing is to break people's hope and destroy it. So I doubt they tell them, but I hope he knows, even if a little bit. I learned that a lot of prisoners would watch news every day. They have to watch news. But I heard that for the Uyghurs in the prisons, especially political prisoners, they're only allowed to watch news that were outdated from years ago. So they don't know what's happening, daily, and they don't know what's the dates and whatever. But I was hoping I would show up in one of those news. That's why I always take media interviews, no matter where, whether it's Fox or CNN. I don't care what your political affiliation is. I hope one day it will achieve and reach to my father's ears, so he will know that people are trying to get him out. It might not happen today, it might not happen in 5 years, but one day we will get him out, and I hope he will get that message.
Let's pause there, because that's a nice place to pause. But first of all, thank you all for coming. Jewher will be hanging around up here, so if you do have questions and want to come up and talk, that's one of the questions.
Oh, one more thing I'd like to share. So besides the labor rights work and books and the advocacy work, I'm also a co-producer for a documentary film. We worked on this documentary film for 4.5 years. We just released it last year. We're doing a global tour right now. We're touring in universities and governments and film festivals. I just got back from Paris, from our Paris screening. It went really, really well. And we also just screened in California as well. So you can go to our website to look at our future screenings, all the screening schedules, and you can also see not only how to help our film, but also how to help the Uyghur cause in general. Is there a blackboard? No, not a blackboard. Oh, no, never mind. So I'm just gonna spell it out for you guys. So the film's name is All Static and Noise. The reason for this name is because the Chinese government just claims all human rights activists, they're just static and noises. We can silence all of them. That's why this film is not just about destruction and about survival, but it's about hope as well. We traveled to 37 cities around the world in 8 different countries to conduct over 300 interviews with camp survivors and activists and prisoners in order to make this film. It's about human rights violations in China, particularly focused on the Uyghurs and Kazakhs, with a storyline of my father as well. And it will showcase a little bit about my advocacy work. Adam is in there showing a little bit as well. It shows one scene of my first visit to meet with Langevin? Yes, I always don't know if it's Langevin or Langevin. So former Rhode Island congressman that we met years and years ago. So yeah, if you're interested, please look us up. It's all static and noise. You just Google this name and it will have our website. From our website, you will be able to see the Google plugin that I mentioned to you about my work as well. You'll be able to see much more information on how to support. You will see like who are the key protagonists in the film. You'll be able to learn more about them as well and different camp survivor stories. And in our book, when you flip to I think 112, page 112, 101, something like that, you will see the interview that I did with one of the camp survivors. It has both the English translation and the Uyghur word. I did the interview in Uyghur, so I thought it was very important to include the Uyghur writings in it because I would like to showcase to the world. That's how Uyghur literature looks like. It is beautiful. We have our own language system. It is not Chinese. It is far away from Chinese. We're ethnically, culturally not related to Chinese at all. So just for people who are wondering, we were occupied. We were forced to speak Chinese at school. And oftentimes Uyghur people, they look different. I might look very Asian to you, but I might look Chinese to you, but in China, people will immediately recognize that I was Uyghur, and that they will separate you and treat you differently because how you look different from them. And then, so yeah, if you would like to learn more about the Uyghurs, about the advocacy work, feel free to read the book and also come to one of our screenings. Many of those screenings are free, especially the ones on campus, and hopefully you can request for the screening to be screened here as well. The ones in Pepperdine, Duke, and North Carolina universities were all requested by students. The university invited us because the students made, I think, a few dozen people made a request. And they invited us and we screened there. So you can make that happen too. Yeah. Thank you very much for coming, and feel free to reach out to me afterwards as well. I'm available via email, whether you're interested in labor rights, human rights, or anything related to China. I'm happy to give you my experience. I wouldn't say advice, but I will share my experience and what worked for me and what didn't work for me. And you could also, if you're not an email person, you could reach out to me on social media as well. I am very slow on hashtags and social media posts, but I am very quick in responding to people's questions. That's something I'm good at. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me. It's Jewher Ilham. And my name is spelled, when you pass, you will see the spelling of my name over there. Yeah, thank you.